She and Apple by Eddythebandkid. Applejack sat under an apple tree. She was asleep with her hat covering her eyes and face. It was about 3 in the afternoon, and Applejack had been apple-bucking since 7 that morning. Suddenly Applejack woke up because the tree started shaking violently and there was a loud crash. The sound of branches snapping echoed the initial crash. Applejack jumped up and looked into the branches of the tree. What the... Hey, AJ! Applejack's friend Rainbow Dash was in the tree, her mane entangled with twigs and leaves. Sorry, was flying by and caught an itch. Funny how I crashed into the same tree you were sitting under, huh? Anyway, I'm heading over to Twilight's house to borrow a book and hang out for a bit. Want to come with? Nah, Applejack said with a yawn. I'm too tired. I just want a nap for a bit. But we should all hang out sometime soon. Tomorrow, maybe? For sure. Anyways, catch you later, Applejack. Gotta fly. Rainbow Dash leaped out of the tree and into the air, and in almost an instant she was off. Applejack sat under the tree again and pulled down her hat, but after a few minutes she was still awake. She was on the verge of being tired, but couldn't quite relax. She was still trying to sleep in the same position, but she was thinking of ways to just settle down and doze off. She was frustrated that she couldn't think clearly to find a way to relax. And she couldn't think clearly because she needed to relax, and she couldn't relax because she was frustrated. It was a vicious cycle, but the cycle soon came to an end as an apple fell onto her stomach and rolled down between her hind legs, brushing past her marehood as it rolled down. She sat up and flicked her hat upright. She picked up the apple in her left forehoof and looked at it for a moment. She looked around the tree over her shoulder. Then she scanned the scenery in front of her to make sure no pony was around to see her. She licked the apple and put it back between her legs and pressed the smooth apple skin against her vagina. She rubbed the apple around her vaginal opening and it slowly became wet. The sensation of the smooth apple brushing past her snatch felt good, but soon teasing had hit the limit of how much pleasure it can cause. Applejack needed a release quickly so she could go back to sleep. She bit the apple with anxiousness and pulled the hat over her face, grinding the apple bits in her mouth with her teeth out of frustration. She then, almost out of instinct, started to rub herself again with the apple, this time with the exposed flesh. Her pussy juices started to mix with the sweet apple juice. This felt slightly better than the smooth skin of the apple, but still wasn't enough. Without lifting her hat, she tossed aside the apple and started using the furry wrist of her right foreleg to pleasure herself. This gave her a new burst of pleasure, as it was a change from the apple, but soon wouldn't be enough to make her satisfied. As she was rubbing herself, she started to think of things to make herself hornier. At first, she started to think of the stallion that had bought a bushel of apples earlier that morning. He was yellow with a black mane, an earth pony that was rather handsome. But soon she was finding it hard to masturbate to the thought of being penetrated by a stallion without actually being penetrated by a phallic object. She started to think of the few toys she had for such an occasion. Too bad they were in her bedroom closet. She thought of all of them. At first she thought of the small red one that vibrates, then the green one that is rubber but has an enlarged head. But her favorite has always been the multicolored one. It was about 1 foot long and was ringed with a rainbow pattern. This one had always been her favorite because it got her off the best. It had ridges that just seemed to rattle her pussy as she used it. She rubbed her wrist against her pussy harder as she thought of all the good times she had had with that toy. But then, for some reason in her mind, she connected Rainbow Dash and the dildo, because she had remembered that she wouldn't be doing this if Dash hadn't unintentionally woke her up. By this time, she didn't care, and if she did, she couldn't help it. She was thinking of Dash using her neck to rub Applejack's pussy as she kissed on her belly and chest. By this time, Applejack started using both wrists to stimulate her sex organs. Both wrists were soaked with Applejack's juices. She started to tingle with pleasure as an orgasm started. She didn't care if she was thinking about her friend. In fact, this made her feel better. Thinking about one of her best friends made masturbating all the better because she could only dream of having that kind of relationship with one of her already good friends. She imagined how nice it would be if her and Dash were friends that could just hang out and do fun things together all day with the rest of the gang, then have their own private fun time stimulating each other at night, just the two of them. Applejack had always taken a liking to Rainbow in that way, though she had tried to hide it by being competitive with her. Applejack was content on just being her friend, though. That was enough for Applejack, to know that Rainbow Dash cared for her in the same way. If only she found out, she'd be so surprised and probably disgusted. I wouldn't blame her for not wanting to be my friend afterwards, Applejack thought. Just then the tree shook again. Applejack was so surprised, her heart stopped for a mere second. Hey again, AJ. Dropped my book in the tree when I crashed. Rainbow's head poked out of the leaves. What are you Both of them looked at each other frozen. Applejack's hat had fallen off when she had jumped as a result of the tree shaking. Applejack still had her hooves between her legs, and Rainbow's jaw was agape. Rainbow, I don't know what to... Applejack started to cry. She put her hooves on her face and covered her eyes. There were strands of liquid running from each wet wrist to between her hind legs. There were also strands of liquid running down her cheeks and dripping onto her stomach and eventually her marehood. I see the problem here, Rainbow Dash said as she fluttered down from the tree and landed in front of Applejack. I can help you out with that. She smiled reassuringly at Applejack. Red-faced, Applejack moved her hooves from her eyes, looked up to her, and replied with teary eyes. Oh, Rainbow Dash, would you? No, Rainbow Dash replied calmly. Sorry, AJ. Unlike most ponies think, I like stallions better than mares. Though sometimes... Rainbow Dash's voice trailed off into silence before she started to go off on her many sexual experiences. I don't want to do these things with you, but I know a few good stallions that you could meet tomorrow. Please, Dash, I'm begging you, Applejack sobbed. I need it right now. Okay, she said. But don't say that I'm not a loyal friend. Rainbow Dash then stepped closer to Applejack and sat down between her open legs. Dash put a hoof on either side of Applejack's thighs and sighed. She then reached her head down to Applejack's snatch and gave it a long stroke with her tongue. This made Applejack let out a slight moan. Before she went any further, Dash hopped up on her hooves so she could lay down with her face in Applejack's crotch. Dash resumed licking. At first she licked around the outside of AJ's pussy. Then she made slow strokes, running up the crease and flicking her tongue off Applejack's clitoris. This really got Applejack going, as now she was moaning with every stroke, letting out a bit of a gasp at the end of each one, as if she didn't expect the flick. At this point, Rainbow Dash was getting wet herself. She couldn't help but start to rub herself with a hoof as she orally pleasured Applejack. Rainbow Dash had enough teasing and decided to part Applejack's lips with her tongue and explore the inside of Applejack's vagina with it. As soon as Rainbow Dash separated Applejack's lips, she was met with a gush of fluids that flooded her mouth. But Rainbow was used to juicy mares, so she ventured on with her tongue. Rainbow Dash was using her tongue to scrape the inside of AJ's vagina as she moved her head around and rubbed her snout into her friend's snatch. By this time, Applejack's moans were heavy and intense as she was soon going to climax. "Oh boy, I just can't believe this is really happening. I mean, my friend Rainbow Dash with me. I feel so happy now. But I'm not returning the favor in any way. Oh, Applejack, you're such a fool," Applejack thought as Rainbow Dash ate out her pussy. "Stop!" Applejack yelled, and Rainbow Dash pulled her face out of AJ's crotch. Her tongue was still dangling out of her mouth, Applejack's wetness dripping off the end. "I don't want to be a pleasure hog, Dash. Turn around, and we can do each other." Nah, I'm okay, AJ. Just sit back and relax and enjoy the ride," Rainbow Dash said, wanting to get things done quickly and get back to Twilight's library. "Well, okay, if you insist," Applejack said. "I insist," Rainbow Dash replied, as she put Applejack's hat over the orange mare's face, much like how it was prior to Applejack waking up. Applejack laid back and closed her eyes under the hat. Rainbow Dash got back to work on Applejack. She started licking her, this time starting with the inside of her thighs. Rainbow Dash licked the sides of AJ's snatch, brushing both the inside and the outside of her pussy at once. She would alternate sides with each lick. Eventually, Applejack started to reach the point of orgasm again, and she grabbed the back of Dash's head and pushed it into her snatch rather firmly. Applejack could feel Rainbow's tongue sliding around inside her, touching every inch of her vagina. Rainbow Dash, like most other things she does, is good at giving oral sex to both stallions and mares. Rainbow Dash doesn't usually go down, but when she does, she makes ponies come. This was it. Applejack was on the verge of climax. She was just about to come when Rainbow Dash suddenly stopped. Applejack couldn't see Dash, but she could hear her get up and start moving around. "Hey, don't just stop on a filler like that. You gotta Applejack started to say as she lifted her hat, but she was dumbstruck by what she saw. Rainbow Dash had got up and turned around, both legs on either side of Applejack. Her sky blue marehood was dripping wet, mere centimeters away from AJ's face. "Hey, mind if I take you up on that offer now, Applejack?" Rainbow Dash started, but she was interrupted by Applejack, who grabbed Rainbow Dash by the flanks and stuck her tongue straight into Dash's pussy. "That answer your question, Rainbow Dash?" Applejack pulled away for a second to ask her. Rainbow's pussy juice hung from the end of Applejack's snout and connected to Dash's wanting vagina. Rainbow Dash responded by just biting her bottom lip, looking over her shoulder at AJ and giving her an expression that said, "Please, please, just fuck me now." Rainbow Dash sat down on AJ's chest. Her hind legs were on either side of Applejack. She went back to work on her friend from this new angle. At the same time, AJ went back to licking Dash. Applejack wasn't too good at giving oral to mares, as she had never been with one before, but she was glad that her first was with Rainbow Dash. Applejack was trying to do the things that Dash was doing to her just minutes ago, but she wasn't as nimble with her tongue as her cyan friend. Applejack stroked Dash's clitoris with the tip of her bright pink tongue, which made Rainbow Dash squeeze AJ's sides with her hind legs. Applejack liked this reaction, so she ventured further and slid her tongue inside of Dash's pussy. She started exploring Dash's insides with her tongue and periodically rubbed her nose and face into Rainbow's snatch. All the while, Rainbow gingerly sucked on Applejack's clit. At first, it came as a shock to Applejack, and she shot out a quick squirt of cum which soaked the grass below Dash's head. "Whoa," Dash said before she went back to using her lips to kiss and caress Applejack's marehood. As Applejack stroked the wet insides of Dash's pussy, she could feel the walls clamp down on her tongue. "Dash is enjoying it," Applejack thought. "I must not be too bad at this." The thought left her mind as Rainbow Dash penetrated Applejack again with her tongue. Applejack's own pussy started to tighten up from the pleasure. Rainbow's tongue went deep into Applejack, and AJ could feel it. She never wanted it to end, but she knew that eventually all things had to come to an end, even the good things. As things went on, they continued to give each other oral sex. They were starting to reach the point of climax. Soon it would be over, and Applejack could finally get some rest. Too bad Dash would have to leave and go back to Twilight's house afterwards. They both started to reach the beginning of their climaxes. Dash's hip started to vibrate as AJ flicked her tongue around inside of the Pegasus. And Applejack's hips were thrusting into the air and coming back down to the ground in violent pulses as Rainbow Dash struggled to hang on and finish the job. She had her lips enclosed around Applejack's pussy lips, and her tongue was inside of AJ exploring deep, but threatening to slip out every time Applejack's hips shot skyward. As their maregasms continued, Rainbow Dash's hips started to shake more intensely, while Applejack's hip movements became smoother. Each time her hips went up, they stayed in the air, vibrated, and then went back down slowly. "This is it," they both thought. They were both about to come together. Each pulled their faces away, drew in a huge gasp of air, and screamed, "I'm gonna..." Simultaneously, they both came in huge waves of ecstasy. Applejack's face was covered in Rainbow Dash's cum, while she made quite a mess of her own in the grass. The wetness was dripping off of the end of her nose and chin. They both let out a heavy sigh and let their muscles relax. After a moment, Rainbow Dash stood up on her hooves, jumped, turned around 180, and landed facing Applejack. Applejack was in between both of Rainbow Dash's forehooves. "That was great, Applejack," Rainbow started to say, but she was quickly silenced when she noticed that Applejack was sound asleep. "Thanks, Applejack. That was really great," she whispered. She then leaned forward, licked all of her own cum off of Applejack's face, and wiped it clean with the fur of her left foreleg. "I wouldn't want to wake up to a sticky mess either. Thanks again, Applejack," she whispered at her sleeping friend, and leaned forward again. This time she kissed Applejack's forehead. She pulled Applejack's hat down to cover the sleeping mare's freshly cleaned face, smiled, turned around, and flew off to Twilight's place, anticipating the next time she would hang out with her friend.